Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hi,
Hey,
Rahul.
hello.
Oh, Rahul, you okay?
Hey, Tom. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hoping, hope you can see the screen, the right window. Okay. I think we have a bunch of action items here. Let me see. Let me do a quick forum check here. Okay. Okay. I guess we have a quorum. Thank you, folks. Let me just quickly edit it. Meanwhile, I hope everyone can look at can see the agenda here. And if you think there's anything specific that has to be added here, updated here, please now would be the time. Shubash, anything? You seem
Sorry, Rahul, is there any noise from my side?
yes. Yeah, we hear some
I'll
noise from
mute.
your side. Okay. Uh, so I don't see Ved on the call. So I'm not sure if we have any updates from the voices of story perspective. The glow monitor and the other part. So since Ved is not on the call, this part I was supposed to prepare a high level Nephew specific requirements for workload identity perspective. I think I have a first draft. Again, it's not in the regular format, the user story format template. I'm hoping to spend 10 minutes on that today. The secrets management ready for review, re-review. Okay, is this
Shiv did a review and did some changes as well. Shiv can talk about it in this
okay?
call.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so we have a separate slot assigned to it, right? Like, we
yeah.
can go on with that.
Yeah.
Thank you. There is a user story document review. Tom, is there any action item from your side pending on this particular thing? Do you think you
Um,
have done?
Alec?
I haven't finished that yet.
Okay,
Huh?
So it's still outstanding. Sorry.
Nee, nee.
okay. Service mesh review, requirements review. Do you have any updates here?
No, I gave the input to Shiv and Shiv, he responded. So I think he's still working on it. So I'm good with the current progress.
Okay. So I'm going to just mark this as done. If there is a new action item, we can then follow it up. I know
Yeah,
that
yeah.
okay, this also the initial draft is prepared. If there is any action item, I'll follow it up. It would be a separate action item. I know that Subhash has already worked on the requirements part. Mark it done. Let me go to the meeting notes first. The second part is I don't know whether I want to. Last time in the last meeting, right? I said that there are certain things that that needs to be considered for the workload identity. I intend to spend like maybe not 15 minutes, but at least 10 minutes on that part. Is there anything that anyone wants to bring up before we go on to this that action item? Okay.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. What is it? Anything? No?
No. Just explain about what's Ericsson's plan. So next week.
Okay. Okay.
So if you go
Uh,
back to briefly there, I mean, just
which flow?
yeah, the identity access management and Manuela, Brian, myself, we are working.
On the
Oops.
document? Hmm.
No. Just a plan. Your plan. Your previous. previous, yeah, this one. So we are planning to present the third review next week with the defined requirement, and we included workload identities.
Fantastic.
So today's your presentation of workload identity, and we can take your input, and then it will be a good complementary, the story. Manuela, any input this so far? And let's wait for.
All van den einde is dat.
Excuse
All
me?
van den einde. Sorry,
But
that was me. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, which is the
That's
request?
I'm just saying that's the plan next week. So Brian, Manuel, myself,
we're going to
present.
integrate the workload requirement that we received. Okay, we're working this week on it, and then on Tuesday we will put everything together.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank
looking
you.
forward.
Yeah.
So if these requirements have been considered, then that's best. I just wanted to make sure that that we are in the same we were thinking in the same direction. That's why I prepared this this PowerPoint in the first place. I'm not sure if when we talk about workload identity, we mean the same thing, but basically my primary aim is to establish the requirements part here. Like if you look at the problems that are faced today, basically we do not have a clear way of authorization in multi-cluster scenarios. That's our primary problem, correct? And typically the service account namespace labels identity today provides identity strategy that is within the Kubernetes scope that at a given cluster scope, right? That's not going to work across multiple clusters. So if the two services in the worker clusters have to be in different worker clusters have to be connected to each other, how would they authenticate and authorize subsequently? If there is a worker cluster workload that needs to communicate with the management cluster service, there is no way to authorize without excessively opening up the permission. So these are some of the problems that I believe we are facing today. And I would like to be corrected if we not if the fundamental problem statement is not in the right direction.
You could also say the reverse, I think, Rahul, right?
Which part? Like the management cluster needs to communicate with the worker cluster.
Yeah, by the both direction, two direction.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Yeah.
I think that we acknowledged some similar problem when we in Ericsson team work on that. We like last time we mentioned about the federation multi-cluster communication and authentication. So that's why we talk about the federation briefly. Anyway, we for now we agree with this problem statement. Okay, yeah.
So if I have to basically split the requirements, right? Like that too, like in the context of user story template as well, there is functional requirement and non-functional requirement. From the functional requirements perspective, the workloads in the management and worker cluster should be able to identify themselves using service account and namespace outside of their cluster scope. This is one requirement, which means that essentially if you can ensure that the same service account and namespace can be used outside of the current cluster scope for identity purpose, then that solves a major problem. Again, this is debatable. This is something that if someone has a different approach, then that can be taken into consideration. Authorization to resources should be.
Sorry, could we ask just a question to well understand your point? Okay, it's clear that we want to authenticate every single workload independently on the fact that is in the management or worker cluster, and that's perfect. I think that is a common requirement. What is not clear to me is why you assume to use for it the service account namespace. I mean, what I have in mind is that the service account is that more than service account, the namespace need to be a sort of filter, but is not exactly the identity for the workload. I mean, the identity could be also something else. The important point in the requirement is that we need to authenticate every single workload independently on the fact that we are on the same cluster or in different clusters. If I got well, I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
I'm wrong.
so let me clarify that what this point means, So today when you deploy any workload, that workload is deployed naturally in one of the Kubernetes cluster, and that workload has its own namespace and service account. Just by the virtue of getting deployed in a particular Kubernetes cluster, it has already this identity. The primary problem with this identity today is that it's not scalable across multiple clusters. The usually in the context of workload identity, what it means is that is it possible for the workloads to identify themselves? So the advantage with this approach is that this service account and namespace becomes a way for attestation purpose. Workloads can say, I'm part of this service account and namespace. Kubernetes under the hood can attest for that particular aspect. And then you get an authentication mechanism. So a certificate can be provisioned based on this attestation mechanism for the workload.
Yes, but I think that the method to authenticate could be also something different with respect to the service account, meaning that maybe the identity of the workload in a multi-cluster scenario could be something different with respect to the service account that typically is used internally to the cluster. Even in Kubernetes, the service account is used only to authenticate on the context of the same cluster. So maybe we wanted to authenticate across different clusters, but the method could be also different. Okay. It's clear the requirement, but maybe we don't use the service account as identity, but something else.
Yeah,
let's split the requirement from the way that we provide the solution. That could be also something different of the service account.
Let me put it this way, So when we deploy any workloads, we do not want any additional manual provisioning to be done for the identity perspective, because that will completely beat the purpose of having Kubernetes in the first place. Ideally, if we can make use of Kubernetes base itself for the identity perspective, that can solve a lot of. What I'm trying to say is that you're right. You need something to identify your workload by itself, right? Yes, you can obviously provision an additional attributes apart from service account and namespace perspective. It is possible to add region, it's possible to add multiple other things. But the point is, in a lot of cases, we need to have some sort of identity which comes out of the box, right? And for I'll give you one example why I brought in the service account and namespace in the context of this particular requirement. Of course, there exist requirements where you might want to extend other attributes apart from service account and namespace itself for identity perspective. But those are specific cases, is what I'm trying to say. The typical use case where, let's say, for example, someone wants access to a particular resource, they need to identify themselves. If that identity itself is provisioned as part of some manual provisioning of some identity token, then it becomes a difficult thing to easily roll out, right? Today, what's happening is we already have edge clusters, we already have regional clusters, we already have management clusters. Each of them already have a bunch of namespaces and service accounts. This can be readily used for identity perspective. Now that you mentioned the right point that service account and namespace today is applicable within a cluster scope. The primary problem is the important thing here is that how do we scale some of these attributes outside of, and then this is a problem that not we are going to solve. This is the problem that the underlying framework should be able to solve. I see Shiv's hand raised. Yeah.
Go ahead, Manuel.
Oh, no problem. It was just to say that Anyway, we can leverage on an identity provider to have this authentication that maybe is already there because worker cluster based their authentication in most cases on an identity provider. So maybe the token is already there. We just need to spread this token across this multi-cluster scenario.
Yes, yes. So in this case, right, when we say service account, right, usually it's associated with the token which is already provisioned by Kubernetes inside the workload itself.
Yeah, but if we use a real identity provider that is not Kubernetes itself, that is not an identity provider, this is the reason why the token related to the service account is only valid inside the same cluster. If we want to go across different clusters, we need to introduce some real identity provider with a token that is a real token, not just the one generated by Kubernetes that has a local meaning and also it can be used just locally.
Yes.
Okay, we
Yes.
needed to in some way enlarge the scope and then introduce some real identity provider with more feature than Kubernetes itself, that by definition is not an authentication, doesn't provide the authentication feature. The only case is locally generating a token related to the service account. But this mechanism can't be used across multiple clusters. I mean, can't be used now.
No,
but also, in my opinion, we can investigate something more. Cannot be extended to be used in a multi-cluster
absolutely,
scenario.
absolutely.
Okay.
Let's hear out the proposal. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let me give one comment before Shiv raise hand. One is as many as Kubernetes support basic authentication, which is not recommended for production, but in my opinion, we can integrate OIDC providers will be integrated with the Kubernetes. That means regardless, I don't want to talk about implementation detail here. Service account, if they have mapped into the OIDC token, which is the outside of the cluster, that means we can do federate the two workload cluster. We can do it. So that's why this is just wording, but we need to discuss more. But I think that for now we just go through, and then Ericsson has some cover how to link the Kubernetes configuration with the OIDC server, which could be Kubernetes, Keycloak, something else, OIDC token. That's what manual talking about token. So if we have some kind of mapping, then we can leveraging the existing configuration in the Kubernetes, and then leveraging the OIDC server for cross multi workload cluster. That's my view.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. So if we can achieve that goal, we can't expect the workloads. Anyways, before going myself into it, Shiv, you have your hand raised. You want to comment?
Yeah, I think so. From what I'm hearing, right, I think probably one of the requirements is basically no additional manual configuration for configuring the mapping, right? So if we have something which we can use out of the box, or if there is a default mapping available, then I see that as a specific requirement, which is which we want to call out. So that's the only point. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So in terms of we don't want workloads to require any changes to the code itself, right? For all this authentication authorization, additional layer of authentication authorization, because we can't expect some of these application code to make any changes inside the code itself. So that's a given.
Yeah, so that we might want to call that out as a specific requirement.
Yes. So it's explicitly mentioned here, right? We can't assume this at all. If we give up this requirement, then basically it will be a major issue.
Problem.
So, yeah. So this is a given issue.
Yeah. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Fantastic. So the other part is, we have already talked that whatever authorization we put in place, it should not be cluster specific. That's of course the basic rule. A workload should be able to retain its identity even if it moves between multiple edge clusters or across different nodes. Across different nodes is much easier to handle, but across even multiple edge clusters or regional clusters. Then it should be possible for additional layers, like for example, tomorrow when we have service mesh, this identity should be able to generate an artifact. It could be a certificate, it could be a token or something else, which can be leveraged for MTLS or IPsec or WireGuard. I know that all these things are not applicable, but for service mesh, MTLS might be applicable.
Yeah, this can relate it to a service mesh, connection. The token keep getting into the service mesh. Is that right for the
right?
MTLS?
Yeah. Eventually, it has to be used for the MTLS part. And then so some non-functional requirement. Again, there is some bias I had towards SPIFFE. It's clearly visible from this document. One thing that we can see is if we can decouple identity from its management layer. I'm not sure if this should be a clear. It should be an explicit for non-functional requirement. If we can keep identity decoupled from its management layer, that would be great. If we can have extensible attestation logic, which means we begin with something, but it should be possible to extend towards other attributes, region, type, package revision, things like that. All of those should be possible. Audit and logging requirement, I think this is a P0 in the sense that almost every identity solution requires you to have some sort of audit and logging, and this is also part of compliance and forensics requirement. The supporting for KubeVirt or non-Kubernetes workloads, again, I don't know whether they should be considered. I just brought it up because this was mentioned in some other context, and maybe it is relevant, maybe it is not. But anything which has support for non-Kubernetes workloads, I see a lot of workloads in the Kubernetes environments getting deployed as KubeVirt-based application. Haven't seen that in the context of Nephew as yet, but in the other 5G deployments, I've seen KubeVirt-based application getting deployed a lot more commonly. And then the best practices that might have to be followed in memory handling of private keys, identity token rotation, least permissive access as far as possible, and ability to revoke identity in the first place. All these form the non-functional requirement. I'm not going to go into the details of personas, day 0, day 1, day 2 activities. There is certain day 0, day 1, day 2 activities that we have to take into consideration. I'm just going to skip through this, open up for discussion. And then, there was some relevance that I found in some other context where I saw that today with SPIFFE as an identity layer, what you can do is let me directly jump to this particular diagram, which shows that if you have multiple edge clusters and these multiple edge clusters have the same namespace and same service account, let's say, for example, because it has the same deployment of the workload, in which case they can register and attest for that particular namespace and service account. And that registration is done at the Spire server end. The management server, which is essentially a management cluster service, does an attestation on its own behalf. Basically, using this mechanism, it is possible for someone to say that I belong to a specific namespace and service account, and that namespace and service account now can be spread across multiple edge clusters. That was one of the view. I see that ORAN has an explicit working group on making sure that, I don't know if it's a working group, but Tim Carey mentioned in the Slack that there is some work happening. I don't know whether anyone has any document in the context how they are planning to do it that could form one of the basis for our decision making as well. But the fundamental point is, using this mechanism, it is possible to actually just leverage some native core Kubernetes elements to authenticate, authorize, and attest the workloads within the Kubernetes clusters itself without doing any manual provisioning of the identity across any of the workloads. That's basically the aim is what I was trying to pitch you.
So in this case, who is doing the registration and the attestation itself? There is a service inside of the cluster?
Yes, there is a service inside of the cluster which attests whether this workload actually belongs to this particular namespace and service account. The primary advantage with this is that, so the moment you deploy a workload inside this particular cluster, they can identify themselves as part of this namespace and this service account. And if the same namespace and service account exist across a different cluster, then that namespace and service account essentially becomes an identity for that particular workload. And that eventually can be made use of. For example, now, for some reason that this config sync requires read access to a vault. Let's say, for example, I'm just giving an example, whether we use vault or not use vault is a different problem. Let's say the management server writes a secret into the vault because it is authorized to write that secret at that particular path. Now, how would this workloads which are executing in the edge clusters get read access to them? They automatically get read access based on the service account and the namespace, and the service account and the namespace remain same across multiple edge clusters.
Because they share the same identity, right?
They share the same identity, exactly. So there is no manual provisioning of identity in this context. As part of Kubernetes deployment, you are specifying, and this is a model that is followed extensively outside. Especially for the workload identity. Google workload identity also deals with the same mechanism. What Google workload identity says is that they will make sure that the namespace and service account visibility is across multiple clusters. So using Google workload, GK workload identity, you can do the same thing. I don't know what they are using under the hood, but here the proposition is to make use of something like this. I think the most important requirement here is that once we are able to do this, then we don't have to provision explicit identity or token inside the workload itself. That's the most important thing. There is no provisioning.
Very nice, yeah. That's very nice.
There is no provisioning required, yeah.
But I'm expecting this must exist already, or is this?
Yeah. No, this exists. This exists this exists, and I've deployed it in my past life. So this already exists.
Okay.
But again, like I said, I'm keen to hear what other proposals exist here. Yeah,
this is a way to use something that is already there, the namespace, the service account.
Yes.
Shared between you deploy the same workload on different cluster, and you give them then the same identity. And this identity is used to gain access to specific resources.
Yes.
Okay, and this is perfect. Let me say that in the moment that we don't add any additional heavy configuration, we can use the service account, but also something else. We can use the concept. How to say, the workload is the entity that we need to give an identity, whatever cluster is deployed on.
If the identity has to scale to other attributes apart from namespace and service account, it is possible. Okay. For example, if this edge cluster belongs to, let's say, for example, region XYZ, and this edge cluster belongs to region ABC, and you want to add that to the attestation and registration procedure and then make that as an explicit attribute, that is possible. That is extensible. So yeah, all that extensibility is possible with Spire. But again, I might be, like I said, I might be biased here because I've previously had experience working with Spiffy and Spire. But I would like to understand if there are any other proposals in the context. The most important thing for us would be that we do not need any manual provisioning of identity in this context. Like that's, if we can achieve that, that would mean that most of our existing solutions works out of the box. There is no change in the deployment procedures that we require.
Yes, that's clear. But sorry, maybe it's just me that I don't know. Spiff is used for the identity and also to distribute the identity across the different cluster. but it's also related to something, authorization role, something like that, or in order to really guarantee the permission to access to the resources.
So
You
what
think
happens is that once this
Uh-huh.
registration and attestation is done, you can then associate a SPIFFE ID for a workload. And that SPIFFE ID actually becomes the means for authorization subsequently.
And the
And where is that
authorization
SPIFFE?
is managed in a different way.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think the SPIFFE ID is used to do the access right and authorization
Yes.
mapping.
Okay.
Yes. So for example,
where is the SPIFFE ID stored, or who is maintaining that? That's
So-
not within the workload cluster?
No. So it's maintained inside the workload cluster, but it's maintained like, so what happens tomorrow is that,
sorry.
yeah. So
Not
let
in the
me give you-
workload is what I'm trying to say. Not in the,
Yeah,
in the
not-
cluster, yes, but not in the
Not inside the workloads, not inside the workload. Inside the cluster, yes, but not inside the workload. So
But it's associated with the service account, basically. So the service account token somehow is associated with the SPIFFE ID.
Yes. Eventually, the service account, no. So the service account token is associated with the SPIFFE ID in the sense that the service account token is made use of for the attestation purpose here. But that's about it. The service account is not eventually. So this SPIFFE ID that I'm talking about here is part of the MTLS handshake as well. So when a connection is being made eventually to the Spire server or to the vault, right? Like that, this SPIFFE ID is part of the TLS connection here. So what knows that, oh, this TLS connection originated from here. It has this particular namespace. It has this particular service account, and it is allowed to do certain access. It already. So all this integrations are built on.
So then the SPIFFE ID actually is actually, it's like the token that is within, there's probably somewhere stored in a certain directory within the workload itself, right?
Yes. It is stored within the end cluster, but it is
within the workload itself is what I'm trying to say, right? Because
as a sidecar,
it's like a certificate. Yeah.
Yes. As a certificate, it is stored inside the workload itself, but as a without making any changes to the workload itself.
And this works across, so it's MTLS, so it will work gRPC, REST, anything that consumes TLS will be okay, I assume.
Yes. And in fact, even if it is non-TLS, right? Like if you want to make use of this identity eventually for some other purpose, let's say, for example, you want to deploy a policy on this edge cluster, which says that I want to apply a policy with this particular SPIFFE. This SPIFFE ID can be engraved as a label on the target workload by a service.
But you could also, because in this case, you basically, the SPIFFE ID is global, if you will, right?
Yes.
Per namespace, but you could also potentially have a hierarchy in here that you say,
yes,
it's part of this workload, but this is on this cluster, and then you can have specific rights associated with each of those specific entities. Or you can, I think in SPIFFE, I'm not that familiar with, I mean, I know what it is, but you could potentially even add multiple identities to a given element or not.
You can add the multiple identities as well. So a particular workload can get multiple identities. In fact, you can assign a bunch of identities for that workload as well, each having its own token. Yeah, each having its own certificate and credential. So yeah, again, like I said, I just wanted to float this idea saying that this concept exists out there. We might want to have a look at this as well, and then maybe derive, if we have some proposition which also takes into consideration some of these aspects, it would be. Thank you. Any questions before we target? I know that Manuela, you'll be presenting in the next call, or and updates based on top of this, based on what reference modules that.
Yes, but what you presented is really interesting. I think that can be used together with what we have. Okay, I don't know SPIFFE in detail. I just knew by name or something, but we can investigate how to integrate and
Precisely.
Put together some
the aim.
preconditions.
This was precisely the aim, to just bring this to the fore, saying something like this exists out there, which can simplify
Yeah,
as well.
It's
good.
also integrated in Istio, in Service Mesh Istio.
Yes, it's integrated with
I
Istio.
remember
It's
it.
integrated. Yeah.
And the Oren team, according to Jim, they are thinking about the speaker too. So I think the many area thinking about speaker ID. So that's a good thing, good synergy. But anyway, so
Boyun, is there any way to get access to the document? I know Team Carry was trying to share a document, but he shared a link.
Which document talking about?
So
Oren?
Oran has prepared a document towards requirement for SPIFFE.
I think that Jim using this Slack channel, he mentioned that this same channel, I think Jim mentioned about they are thinking about SPIFFE too. And also ONEP and also Oren, we have some cross discussion. And then ONEP is not using SPIFFE ID, but we try to, we are studying on that. So we are working on it. So that's why if the Oren is thinking about this and then ONEB is working on it, and then if we can apply this, that means 3 communities can share the. That's good thing. But we'll see. But anyway, the next week we're gonna it's a good presentation. We're gonna think about your suggestion, and we have some other way. So Manuel, Brian, and myself, we're gonna try to incorporate your suggestion here into our requirement document, and then we plan to share. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to the next point, secrets management update. Anything, Prashant? Any updates from this side?
Yeah, Shiv, do you wanna?
Yeah, sure.
Shiv,
Actually,
did you had a chance to review? Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, I'm just sort of incorporating the comments which came up. So just one single question which I have. So currently, I think there are Git secrets tokens which are passed from management cluster to workload cluster. So, but do we have cases of the other way around where workload cluster passes secrets to the management cluster? So I put this question in the Slack, but then I just wanted to quickly check and then.
I think in the radio had a case, but we converted. So we put it the other way around. So originally they had this requirement, but then we reverted it. So today, but yeah, I mean.
Sure,
but
I
if
just
you
wanted to see
going forward with what Rahul just presented, right? If you basically have an identity system, then accessing a secret, I think it seems to be the way forward here as well, right?
Yeah, then it shouldn't matter. Basically, either way you should be able to send it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so then, this is just a small detail which I just wanted to, because I had that doubt. So I'll clean up the document and then, post it out again for, I think most of the review comments are in, and, we'll just probably see for any final comments, and then we can sort of take that as a given, right? So that's it.
Okay. Not final. For the updates to be made to the document.
Yeah, updates to be made. Basically, review comments to be addressed, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I know Tim was also reviewing it in parallel. Tim, would you be in a position to actually review this document after this updates are made?
I guess Tom was.
Oh, sorry. So sorry, Tom. Yeah. Tom, you had reviewed a previous version of this document, right? Like.
Happy to do so again. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. For the service mesh updates, is there anything, Shiv, that you want to discuss right now?
Yeah, quickly, a couple of minutes. That's it. I'll just quickly share the screen. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the comments from Byung was, whether there are any service mesh requirements for Nephew built-in components. So from what I understand, the Nephew built-in components are basically, most of them are controllers, and they are interacting with the API server only. And since service mesh is for traffic between services, or rather east-west traffic, right? So I don't see any service mesh requirements for inbuilt components. So that's the.
But that should not matter, right?
That will change, I think, a bit going forward, I believe.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, any specific, yeah, I mean, I think as and when any components are there, if you know, you can, if you can, I'll take a look at it. But currently, that's what I see. It's not there. I mean, so.
Yeah, for example, so today, okay, so it's true for the controller paradigm, right? And I think for the most part, it will be the same, right? Except for, so where it will change is, so at the moment, we don't have that yet, but we will have to add capabilities to provide updates from the workload cluster to the management cluster, for example, right? And to get information from it. So that's where there will be. And the second place where there is actually inter-cluster communication through the default network is on the control plane side between the network functions itself.
Yeah, so between network functions, that's already taken care of in the sense that, you know, that we have identified. This is basically for Nephew controllers and operators.
For Nephew controllers today, the only thing that communicates is config sync between the cluster at the moment.
Right.
Or the GitOps tools.
Yes, and that also basically communicates with the API server only, right? It's basically, and not to any other, you know, so in the sense that is already, yeah, that's already secure, and, you know, yeah.
It communicates to Git, right? So to the Git, to the Git repos, to a Git server, basically, which is hosted on the management cluster for Sandbox.
Okay, okay, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, correct, got it, yeah. So we need to communication to Git is yeah. So
Git or Git, I put Git in general because some people use GitHub and it should be any Git.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any Git provider. Yeah. Sure. I think
put Git and not GitHub because some people might not.
Sorry. Okay. So that is one point. Then the other point was that I think which being brought up was that who is responsible for service mesh configuration, right? And we might want to define as personnel and associated requirements. So I need to actually figure this out because service mesh configuration might be through another package from what my current understanding is. Because I see packages for KindNet, for Multus, and so on. So it might be through a package. That's my understanding. So
that would be right, yeah. So there is we should build a package for it, right?
Yeah.
And so then yes. Yeah. So the other thing that we are working on is NF2Infra, right? So it will automatically install those things if you would create a hook to it. So and it would also put the right config onto it. So the config of the service, so the way to structure it, the packages, so I would say there are two packages. One is for the software, and the second is for the configuration. You should split it, I think.
Yeah. Right. So you were mentioning what was that network infra? Is it what you mentioned?
Yeah. So we are working on a framework. So the problem that you have today, right, is that we have all of these dependencies between software. So, for example, you say, this is another use case of it, right? So some people will deploy a service mesh, some people don't deploy a service mesh, right? So now some people want to deploy specific software and others not, right? So you have this whole matrix of software that is somehow dependent on each other, right? So we are working on a framework that takes care of all of that. So you basically, so the idea was or came actually from the operators itself. They basically said, okay, I want to deploy this network function, right? please figure out how to do it, right? I don't, today it's a huge effort to figure out all the dependencies. And there's a lot of manual work. So we have worked out a framework. So we are implementing a prototype right now that takes care of all of that using the packages itself, right? So what you basically do is, for example, I almost have a prototype ready. It will take 1 or 2 months to be able to demo it. But so the idea is you basically say, okay, I want to deploy a cluster, right? And if you specify within the cluster that you need a service mesh, it will take care of installing service mesh for you.
Okay. Got it. So
but as today,
whereas
today you have to basically, so today we have like a sandbox which has a specific opinionated set of packages, and then Google has another one, and OpenShift has another one, and we have to create a lot of effort to put this together and stuff like that. So this will be, all of it will be taken care of.
Okay.
Just by specifying requirements. Yeah.
Okay. The Wim's question. So service mesh, for example, there is a nephew built-in component. They just talking each other, they know what to do, and we can configure that one. And there is the vendor operator. They adding the controller, and they want to interact with other controller, which from a nephew, and also third-party vendor. So that means you said when you create a work cluster, that means you have some kind of framework inject the service mesh automatically that you're saying?
Yeah, so if you specify that as part of your workload cluster, you need a service mesh, right? You will get it will basically figure out the package that you are interested in or that is supported by that operator, and then it will install that.
Okay, then each component, they know which other component can access. It's kind of authorization. If we're using the Istio based the service mesh, then they have some authorization policy. Then policy should be defined in the package part of that.
Yes.
Then okay, they automatically inject. Okay.
Yep, correct.
That means you have some kind of a framework can handle service mesh injection based on configuration. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it basically takes care of anything. It's a service mesh is an example of it, but it's applicable to any KRM element.
Okay. That's nice.
Okay, and so moving on, so these are the final list of requirements which is there. So I guess this is a minimal set which I was able to identify, and just wanted to get the group on the same page regarding this. So if this is fine, then we can go ahead. So we have TLS, and then we want rate control between services. So because we don't want DOS attacks on the services. We have observability because we want to ensure and see what is the traffic which operators can use later on for anomaly detection. We need support for stateful sets because we might have load balancing which needs to be done and between various pods which are part of a stateful set. Single stack support for V4 or for V6, but no dual stack as such. And then service mesh support for control plane related communication only, and not for data plane, not for the user plane, the UPF related communication. And then finally, ability to configure service mesh on a given interface, because there are multiple interfaces. As we see, there's multi-homing which is there, and we want to ensure that service mesh targets a given interface. So this is the overall set, and I think this is fine, and we can sort of close at this point.
Yeah. A question here is for it to work. Is the DNS, is there a dependency?
I mean, there would be some dependent on identities, right? I think because you need because
the reason I'm asking is Yeah, so the question is, so do they need a DNS service to be up and running that you get communication between the clusters and stuff like that? Because today in Nephew we don't really do that at the moment.
Okay. You would need
so today in Nephew, if one particular edge cluster has to communicate to other edge cluster, does that communication happen today? I'm not sure about that.
So it's all IP. So the reason I'm asking is because so we did the IPAM service, which basically does global IP allocation across the clusters, right? So so it takes care of it, right? So we do IP based resolution right now, which is actually, in my view, not the right way forward. Right. So I have added a capability, or it's a bit lower priority right now. But I'm going to extend the DNS service on top of it. So using core DNS. So I actually build a small plugin of it, but I haven't really tested it completely and stuff like that. So then you can use just regular DNS, and every cluster and every VPN will get its own domain, right? Similar to how the services work inside of a cluster, right?
Yeah. But I do not think that there is any specific dependency of service mesh on DNS per se. Per se. When the DNS based routing is available, then that will anyway start working.
Yeah, that's why my question is, it requires DNS, an inter-cluster DNS system to be available, right?
Yeah. I think it's an important.
That's my assumption. I was not 100% sure, but so we need to basically so that DNS thing will become important.
I think so. I'm kind of I wonder whether that has been discussed in any other. Because this is not really security related aspect, right? Getting the DNS working. So I wonder whether that has already been taken up in any other working group or SIG.
No, I see. Okay, it was brought up in R2, right? So it came up again there, but then we had a workaround, so we didn't do it.
Okay.
But then end of last year, I started to work on the core DNS plugin, but then with this NF2 infra, I had a bit of a priority, so I focused on that, right? So, but it's not a huge effort, so it's like 1 or 2 weeks, and then we'll get this sorted. But
I think we need to prioritize this. If there is some discussion happening about scope somewhere, I feel this should be an important one.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, right? So basically, so I'm not looking at service mesh across different clusters because I felt that as of now, whatever inter-cluster communication is there, that can be serviced through external load balancing service or through an ingress controller approach for inter-cluster access. So I hope. So is that okay? I mean, because this service mesh is basically within a given cluster only. So that was. That should be okay.
Within a cluster, it's not a problem, right? So within a cluster, it's okay because there we have local DNS, right? So it's just across clusters.
Okay, so we are okay. So basically, service mesh across different clusters, that also would be a requirement. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, I think that should be a requirement issue because basically within a cluster, whatever you do, it's not going to matter much, right? Like it's between the clusters that communication will matter most.
So basically, like Gnode be accessing an AMF or that sort of a thing. I think that's the example which I considered over here. And so you've got multiple AMFs across different clusters, and you're doing load balancing across them using a service mesh. I mean, is that the use case that you're looking at? Or I mean, it's open-ended, and people can use it if it's available. Is that?
I think it's open-ended because I already see that there is some communication that is happening between clusters, but there is no clear.
So what Sagar did in R2, it's basically deployed Scupper, right? But it's very, it was also like, okay, this will work. Okay, let's take it. Wasn't really discussed basically, right?
Yeah. Okay. Hey, so I think we'll have to stop at this particular point in time. 5 minutes left. Can I share my screen back?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've already talked about identity and access management. Ericsson team is going to plan and present that next week. Subhash, are you there?
Yeah, Rahul.
Yes. The floor is yours. Anything you want to bring up?
Yeah, I just wanted to decide like would everyone will be interested on this story or going forward, or what exactly the next step will do for this particular user story?
Okay,
Yeah,
I think we need some discussions across, like, I think some discussions are in progress. I would suggest that, we circle back, maybe, we keep this warm,
Okay.
but based on priority and everything else, we can circle back and check, how what part of this and how much of it do we want to do it now. Is that okay? Maybe, all I'm suggesting is that we need to have a few discussions across, maybe not necessarily in this SIG, but outside of this SIG, because there are certain unknowns, right? Like that's what is sort of causing the concern, the dependency on Porch and its corresponding elements. So let's have a few discussions, sidebars about this, and then we can handle back.
I would
we
request
brought up
actually.
so Sebastian. So last week, were you there in SIG2 meeting?
I was not there.
No,
I was not there. No.
Because the issue with Porsche was brought up. I mean, we discussed it there. So we're going to have some sessions on what do we do about it and stuff like that. So we are starting to see what to do with Porsche and how to handle it forward. So if you listen to the recording of last week, you will get some understanding.
Actually, yeah, sure. That I will do it. And one request also I have is if you can comment on that particular user story, it's like how it is dependent on the Porsche. I think that idea I was not able to get it properly. So that will help me to understand like to resolve the issue actually. Because I feel that
I mean,
it's still
see the problem is, I mean, you have so I can comment onto the documents, but basically you have two things, right? You can either do the solution offline, in which case you don't have a dependency, right? But then I would say just use OPA and do whatever you do, right? There's nothing to be done for us. And then if you really want to have that tied to the approval controller, you have to change the way that you interact with the ports and how all the conditioning and stuff like that happens. And then you basically have to change a number of this logic, which is very fragile at the moment. So I would prefer not to do that right now and wait till we have fixed that.
Okay.
That's basically the issue.
Okay,
it's nothing
if you help me
to do with the use case. It has to do with the implementation that we have at the moment.
Okay. Oh, sure. I got it. But yeah, just to understand that that idea, please, if you get the time, just to comment on that user story. I'll try to follow. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else has a point to make? We have 1 minute left to go. I guess we're good. Thank you very much, folks. Have a good day. Good week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, all. Bye.
Thank you.